You have 72 hours to pay $10,000, or I'm filing a lien against your property." Karen's voice dripped with satisfaction as she slid the citation across my kitchen table. I looked at the paper, then at her smug face, and smiled. "Actually, Karen, I think you'll find that in 72 hours, you'll be the one writing me a check. You see, I just bought your mortgage." 3 months earlier, my name is David Chun, and I'm a financial analyst who moved to Riverside Meadows, thinking I'd found the perfect suburban paradise. The houses were beautiful, the lawns were pristine, and the neighborhood seemed peaceful. What I didn't know was that our homeowners association was run by a woman who would make my life a living nightmare. Karen Mitchell was the HOA treasurer, and she took her role with a kind of zealous authority usually reserved for medieval inquisitors. She was in her late 50s, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair that never moved in the wind, designer sunglasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a perpetual expression that suggested she'd just smelled something unpleasant. My first encounter with Karen came exactly 1 week after I moved in. I was still unpacking boxers when I heard an aggressive knock on my door. I opened it to find Karen standing there with a clipboard, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Mr. Chun," she said, emphasizing my name with an odd inflection that made it sound like an accusation. "I'm Karen Mitchell, HOA treasurer. We need to discuss several violations." Violations. I looked past her at my front yard. "I just moved in last Tuesday." "Which is precisely the problem." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Your trash bins are the wrong color. They should be forest green, not standard black. That's a $250 fine. Your mailbox is 3 inches too tall according to the covenant specifications. That's another $200 fine. And your car was parked on the street overnight, which violates Section 7 of our parking ordinance. Another $300 fine." I stared at her, certain this had to be some kind of joke. That's $750 in fines for things I didn't even know were rules. Ignorance of HOA regulations is not an excuse, Mr. Chun. The covenant was included in your closing documents. You should have read it. She tore off 3 pink citation slips and handed them to me. "Payment is due within 30 days. Welcome to the neighborhood." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against my driveway like a countdown timer. I stood there holding 3 pink slips totaling $750 and realized I'd made a terrible mistake moving to Riverside Meadows. Over the next 6 weeks, Karen found reasons to fine me constantly. My lawn was 1/8 of an inch too long. Fine, $175. I hung a wreath on my door in early October. Fine, $150 for premature holiday decorations. My hedge trimmer made noise before 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Fine, $225 for disturbing the peace. Every time I paid a fine, Karen would hand-deliver the next citation with a smile that never reached her eyes. She was enjoying this. I was her personal ATM machine, and she was making withdrawals every week. The only bright spot in this nightmare was Barbara Chun, no relation, despite sharing a last name. Barbara was the HOA president, and she was everything Karen wasn't. Where Karen was cold and vindictive, Barbara was warm and reasonable. She had kind eyes behind her red-framed glasses, always wore professional blazers in cheerful colors, and genuinely seemed to care about the community. I met Barbara at my 3rd HOA meeting, which I attended specifically to complain about Karen's ridiculous fines. I stood up during the open forum section and began listing every citation I'd received. Trash bins the wrong color. Mailbox 3 inches too tall. Car parked on the street. Lawn 1/8 inch too long. A wreath in October using a hedge trimmer at 8:57 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. I looked around the room at my neighbors, many of whom were nodding sympathetically. In 6 weeks, I've been fined over $2,300. This isn't governance. This is harassment. Karen stood up immediately. Mr. Chun is attempting to paint himself as a victim when he is simply a resident who refuses to follow clearly stated rules. Every fine issued has been legitimate and, according to our covenant— Karen, sit down, please. Barbara's voice was firm but not unkind. She turned to me with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Chun, I want to apologize on behalf of the board. While technically, the citations may fall within our covenant language, the spirit of our HOA has never been to punish residents for minor infractions. I'll review your case personally." Karen's face flushed red. "As treasurer, I have the authority to, as president, I have the authority to review any citations I deem excessive or inappropriate." Barbara raised her hand gently, and Karen fell silent, though her expression could have curdled milk. "We'll table this discussion for now. Mr. Chun, please see me after the meeting." After the meeting ended, Barbara approached me with a warm smile. "I'm truly sorry about all this. Karen can be zealous in her interpretation of the rules. I'll have the board review your fines, and I'm confident we can reduce or eliminate most of them." "Thank you, Barbara. I really appreciate it." I felt genuine relief for the first time in weeks. "Don't thank me yet," she said, lowering her voice and glancing toward where Karen was gathering her papers. "Karen doesn't like to be challenged. This might get worse before it gets better." Barbara was right. 2 days later, I received a citation for having unapproved window treatments visible from the street. Fine, $350. The window treatments in question were the standard blinds that came with the house. I called Barbara immediately. "She's retaliating." "I know," Barbara sighed. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. We need to discuss limiting Karen's authority to issue fines without board approval." The emergency board meeting was tense. Barbara proposed a new policy requiring all fines over $100 to be approved by at least 2 board members. Karen fought against it viciously, but Barbara remained calm and collected, methodically making her case. In the end, the policy passed 4 votes to 1, with Karen being the only dissenting vote. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Karen became creative. She started issuing multiple small fines instead of single large ones. $99 for this, $99 for that. Technically under the new threshold, but clearly designed to circumvent the policy. When I trimmed my hedges, she measured them with a tape measure and issued citations for 3 different bushes being non-uniform heights. $297 total. I paid the fines, but I also started documenting everything. Photos, videos, written records of every interaction. I had a feeling I was going to need evidence eventually. The breaking point came in late November. I was hosting Thanksgiving dinner for my family when Karen appeared at my door with another citation. My sister's car, which was parked legally in my driveway, apparently violated a rule about commercial vehicles because it had a small company logo on the side. She worked for a bakery. That's a $500 fine for each day the vehicle remains on the property. Karen announced loudly enough for my family inside to hear. "Karen, it's Thanksgiving. Can't this wait? Violations don't take holidays, Mr. Chun." She handed me the citation and walked away. I stood in my doorway, holding yet another pink slip, and something inside me snapped. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done being angry. Instead, a cold, calculated calm settled over me. Karen wanted to play games with money. Fine. I was a financial analyst. Money games were my specialty. That evening, after my family left, I opened my laptop and started researching. If Karen was going to treat me like an adversary, I needed to understand my enemy. I started with public records. Property records showed that Karen's house was worth approximately $450,000. She'd purchased it 11 years ago for $320,000. Standard appreciation for the area, nothing unusual there. Then I checked mortgage records. Karen had refinanced 3 years ago, taking out a new loan for $380,000. That was interesting. She'd pulled out equity. A lot of it, nearly $200,000 in cash-out refinancing. Dug deeper. Court records showed 2 civil judgments against Karen totaling $67,000. Credit card debt collections, medical bills. I cross-referenced property tax records and found she was 4 months behind on payments. The picture became clear. Karen was in serious financial trouble. The refinancing had been a desperate attempt to consolidate debt, but it hadn't worked. She was drowning, and the mortgage payments on a $380,000 loan were probably crushing her. I sat back in my chair, thinking. Karen had made my life miserable for months, extracting thousands of dollars from me in petty fines. She'd done it because she enjoyed the power, but maybe also because she needed the money. HOA treasurers sometimes had access to funds. Had Karen been helping herself to HOA money? I needed more information. I requested copies of the HOA's financial records, which, as a member, I was legally entitled to review. Barbara provided them within 3 days, and I spent an entire weekend going through every transaction for the past 2 years. What I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of irregular transactions. Payments to vendors that didn't exist, reimbursements for supplies with no receipts, small amounts, usually under $500, but they added up over 2 years. Karen had embezzled approximately $38,000 from the HOA. I made copies of everything and contacted a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes. He reviewed my evidence and confirmed what I suspected. This is embezzlement. A sighed grimly. You have enough here to file both civil and criminal charges, but I'd recommend starting with the civil approach, filing a complaint with the board and demanding restitution. If she doesn't comply, then you escalate to law enforcement. I thanked him and left his office with a plan forming in my mind. But that plan changed dramatically the next day when I received Karen's ultimate act of aggression. I came home from work to find a notice taped to my door. Not a citation this time. Lawsuit. Karen was suing me personally for defamation and harassment for $10,000. The complaint cited my speech at the HOA meeting and my continued pattern of questioning legitimate HOA business. It was absurd. It was frivolous. It would likely be dismissed, but it would still cost me time and legal fees to fight. Karen was escalating, trying to intimidate me into silence. I called Barbara immediately. Did you see what Karen did? I did. David, I'm so sorry. This has gone way too far. I'm calling for a vote to remove her as treasurer at next week's board meeting. That's not going to be enough, Barbara. I have evidence that Karen's been embezzling from the HOA. There was a long pause. What? I explained everything I'd found. The irregular transactions, the missing receipts, the phantom vendors. Barbara listened in stunned silence. Oh my God, she whispered when I finished. I trusted her. How did I not see this? She was careful. Small. Amounts spread out over time, but it's all documented in the records she provided. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to make sure she can't hurt anyone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Karen's mortgage situation, her embezzlement, her desperate financial state. And then, around 3 a.m., an idea struck me. It was bold. It was risky, but it was absolutely perfect. The next morning, I made a phone call to my contact at a debt purchasing firm. I need information about distressed mortgages in the Riverside area, specifically any loans that are seriously delinquent and might be sold to collection agencies. He called me back 3 hours later. I found something interesting. There's a loan serviced by Coastal Lending that's 7 months delinquent. The property is at 4217 Maple Grove Drive. Is that help? 4217 Maple Grove Drive. Karen's address? Yes, I said slowly. That helps a lot. What would it take to purchase that debt? My contact laughed. You want to buy someone's mortgage? That's unusual for an individual. But if you're serious, I can make some calls. The lender would probably sell it at a discount, just to get it off their books. Maybe 70 cents on the dollar. We're talking about $265,000 remaining on the loan, so you'd need roughly $185,000 cash to make this work. I did some quick mental math. I had that much in investments. It would liquidate most of my savings, but the potential payoff. Make the calls, I said. I'm very serious. What do you think will happen when David buys Karen's mortgage? Will he use it to stop her harassment, or will this plan backfire? Drop your predictions in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to see how this revenge story unfolds. The next 72 hours were the most intense of my life. While Karen was busy preparing her frivolous lawsuit against me, I was quietly orchestrating the financial move that would change everything between us. My contact at the debt purchasing firm, Marcus, worked miracles. He connected me with the asset manager at Coastal Lending, who was desperate to offload Karen's delinquent mortgage. The loan had been in default for 7 months, and the foreclosure process was expensive and time-consuming. They were eager to sell. We have the loan valued at $265,000 remaining principal, the asset manager explained over the phone. Given the delinquency and legal costs we're facing, we're willing to accept $178,000 for immediate sale. That's about 67 cents on the dollar. I did the math quickly. If I purchased the debt for $178,000, I would own a loan worth $265,000, secured by a property worth $450,000. Even if Karen declared bankruptcy, I'd likely recover most of my investment through foreclosure. But I wasn't planning on foreclosing. I had something much better in mind. "I'll take it," I said. "How quickly can we close this transaction? If you can provide proof of funds today, we can have the paperwork ready by Friday. The transfer would be complete by Monday." I spent that afternoon on the phone with my investment broker, liquidating stocks and bonds. It hurt to drain my investment accounts, but the potential payoff was worth it. By 5 p.m., I'd wired $178,000 to an escrow account. Meanwhile, Karen was spreading her lawsuit news around the neighborhood. I saw her talking to other residents, showing them the legal papers, painting herself as the victim of my harassment campaign. Some people seemed sympathetic to her. Others looked skeptical. Barbara openly confronted her at the mailbox. "This lawsuit is ridiculous, Karen, and you know it," I heard Barbara say as I picked up my own mail. "David has every right to question HOA finances, especially now. Especially now." Karen's voice rose sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" Barbara lowered her voice, but I could still hear her. "It means I've been reviewing the financial records myself, and I have some serious questions about certain transactions." Karen's face went pale, then flushed red. "How dare you question my integrity? I've been managing this HOA's finances for 6 years, and in those 6 years, we've somehow spent $38,000 on supplies and services with no documentation. I'm calling a special board meeting for next Thursday. You'll need to provide receipts and explanations for every questionable transaction." Karen grabbed her mail and stormed toward her house without another word. I caught Barbara's eye and gave her a small nod of appreciation. She nodded back, but her expression was troubled. That evening, Karen appeared at my door again. This time, she wasn't holding a citation. She was holding a stack of papers at least 2 inches thick. "You want a documentation?" she snapped. "Here's documentation. Every single receipt, every invoice, every transaction from the past 6 years. I'm going to prove to the board and to everyone in this neighborhood that I've done nothing wrong. And then my lawsuit against you is going to proceed. You're going to regret ever moving here." I took the stack of papers calmly. "Thank you, Karen. I look forward to reviewing these." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You think you're clever, getting Barbara on your side, but I've been running this HOA long before you arrived, and I'll be running it long after you leave. People like you don't win against people like me." I smiled. "We'll see about that." She left, and I spent the rest of the evening going through her documentation. It was impressive, I had to admit. She'd created fake invoices, forged vendor signatures, and manufactured paper trails for transactions that never happened. If you didn't know what to look for, it would seem legitimate. But I knew what to look for, and the evidence of fraud was everywhere. Once you understood the patterns, I forwarded everything to my lawyer with a detailed analysis. He called me back within an hour. "This is actually better than what we had before," he said, sounding excited. "She's just handed you documented proof of fraud. Some of these vendor addresses don't exist. These signatures don't match business registry records. She's created an entire false accounting system. David, you have her dead to rights." Good, but hold off on filing anything yet. I have one more piece to put in place. Friday arrived, and I received the call I'd been waiting for. Mr. Chun, this is Patricia. From Coastal Lending, the mortgage debt transfer is complete. As of 9 a.m. this morning, you are the legal holder of the note and deed of trust, 44217, Maple Grove Drive. Congratulations! I thanked her and hung up, then sat at my desk for a long moment, holding the documents that made me Karen's mortgage holder. The irony was beautiful. For months, she'd been extracting money from me through petty fines. Now I literally owned her house debt. But I wasn't ready to reveal this yet. First, I wanted to see how the board meeting would go. Thursday evening arrived. The special board meeting was held at the community center, and nearly 50 residents showed up 3 times the usual attendance. Word had spread that something big was happening. Barbara called the meeting to order and got straight to the point. We're here tonight to address concerns about HOA financial management. Karen, as treasurer, you've had sole authority over our accounts for 6 years. Recent audits have revealed irregularities that need explanation. Karen stood up, her face composed, but her hands trembling slightly. I've provided complete documentation for every transaction in question. These irregularities are simply the result of poor bookkeeping on my part. Nothing more. I've made some administrative errors in how I recorded certain expenses, but every dollar spent was for legitimate HOA purposes. Barbara nodded slowly. Can you explain why we paid $12,000 to Riverside Landscaping Services when no such company is registered in the state? That was a contractor who worked under that name informally. He's since gone out of business. And Premium Supply Company, which received $8,000 over 2 years, office supplies and maintenance materials. The company closed last year. And coincidentally, every vendor you can't provide contact information for has either closed or can't be verified. Karen's composure cracked slightly. I don't like what you're implying, Barbara. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You spent $38,000 of HOA money with no verifiable documentation, and every time we try to trace these expenses, we hit a dead end. Barbara looked around the room. I'm recommending that the board vote to remove Karen as treasurer effective immediately and authorize a full forensic audit of our finances. The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's face turned crimson. This is a witch hunt. You're all turning against me because David Chun has poisoned your minds with his lies. I stood up calmly. Karen, I haven't said a word tonight. I've just been listening. But since you brought me up, let me share something interesting. I pulled out my phone and projected images onto the community center. Screenshots of fake invoices, comparison analyzes showing patterns of fraud, timeline documents showing how the embezzlement had escalated over time. This is your documentation, Karen. Your invoices. Your signatures. And here's the proof that half these companies never existed. The room went silent. Karen stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You, she stammered, you had no right to investigate me. Actually, as an HOA member, I had every right to request and review financial records. And what I found was systematic embezzlement. You've stolen from every person in this room. Barbara stood up. All in favor of immediately removing Karen Mitchell as treasurer. Every hand in the room went up, except Karen's. All in favor of authorizing a forensic audit and referring this matter to law enforcement if fraud is confirmed. Again, every hand except Karen's. Karen looked around the room at her former neighbors, seeing nothing but anger and betrayal in their faces. She grabbed her purse and rushed toward the door, but Barbara's voice stopped her. Karen, you'll need to surrender all HOA financial documents, passwords, and access to accounts by noon tomorrow. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to involve law enforcement immediately. Karen didn't respond. Sehust left, slamming the door behind her. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize for not standing up to Karen soon. One elderly couple, the Hendersons, looked particularly guilty. She'll find us $1,400 last year for excessive garden ornaments, Mr. Henderson said. We paid it because we were afraid she'd make our lives miserable. She did make our lives miserable, his wife added. But we were too scared to fight back. Thank you for having the courage we didn't. I assured them it was okay. But inside I was thinking about how many people Karen had bullied over the years, how much money she'd extracted through fear and intimidation, how many lives she'd made miserable because she enjoyed the power. Well, her power was about to come to an end. The next morning, I watched from my window as a police car pulled up to Karen's house. 2 officers went inside and emerged 20 minutes later with several boxes of documents. The forensic audit was beginning. That afternoon, I received notice that Karen had officially dropped her $10,000 lawsuit against me. Her lawyer had withdrawn from the case, probably after learning about the embezzlement investigation. It was a small victory, but satisfying nonetheless. But I still hadn't played my final card. 2 days later, I sent Karen a certified letter. It was a formal notice that her mortgage had been transferred to a new holder, that she was currently 7 months delinquent. The letter stated that she had 30 days to either bring the loan current by paying $21,000 in back payments plus late fees, or enter into a repayment agreement with the new loan holder. I included my phone number and a note. I'm willing to discuss reasonable arrangements. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I knew she'd received the letter when I heard screaming from her house that afternoon. 10 minutes later, she was pounding on my door. I opened it calmly. "Hello, Karen, you bought my mortgage," she shrieked. "How did you even? That's not possible. You can't do that." "Actually, I can. Mortgage debt is bought and sold all the time. Coastal Lending was happy to sell your delinquent loan at a discount. As of last Monday, I'm your mortgage holder." She stared at me, her face cycling through emotions: disbelief, rage, fear, desperation. This is revenge. This is illegal. It's completely legal. I purchased debt that was for sale, the same way collection agencies buy credit card debt, the same way any debt can be sold. You've taught me a valuable lesson, Karen. Everything has a price. Even mortgages. I'll fight this. I'll sue you for harassment, for predatory lending, for what? Following the same laws you've been using against everyone in this neighborhood for years. I kept my voice level. You've spent months extracting money from me for every tiny violation you could find. Now I own your mortgage. Funny how things work out. She was shaking now, tears starting to form in her eyes. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked vulnerable, human, scared. I can't pay $21,000. I don't have it. I know. I've seen your financial records. You're drowning in debt, you're behind on property taxes, and you've been embezzling from the HOA to try to stay afloat. It hasn't worked. She collapsed against my doorframe, all her arrogance gone. What do you want from me? I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd made my life hell, who'd bullied countless neighbors, who'd stolen from the community. Part of me wanted to twist the knife to make her suffer the way she'd made others suffer. But another part of me, the part that had learned something from Barbara's grace and dignity, knew there was a better way. I want you to come to the next HOA meeting, I said quietly. I want you to confess everything you've done. I want you to apologize to every person you've hurt. And I want you to agree to a repayment plan for the money you embezzled. And if I do that, then I'll restructure your mortgage at 0% interest and work with you on a payment plan you can actually afford. I don't want your house, Karen. I want justice. There's a difference. She looked up at me, searching my face for deception. Why would you do that? Because someone recently taught me that revenge isn't always about crushing your enemy. Sometimes it's about being better than they were. I stepped back. You have until next Tuesday's meeting to decide. Either work with me, or I'll proceed with foreclosure and let the criminal investigation run its course. Your choice. I closed the door, leaving her standing on my porch, and wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, for the smartest move yet. Will Karen take David's offer, or will she try to fight back one more time? Can someone who's caused so much pain really change? Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed to see what happens next in this incredible story. The weekend before the Tuesday HOA meeting was the longest of my life. He kept second-guessing my decision to offer Karen a way out. She'd tormented me for months, stolen from the community, and shown zero remorse until I had her backed into a corner. Why was I giving her mercy she'd never shown anyone else? Barbara helped me understand when she invited me over for coffee on Sunday morning. "You're doing the right thing," she said, pouring me a cup of her excellent dark roast. "What you're offering, Karen, isn't mercy. It's accountability with dignity." "There's a difference." "Is there? Because right now it feels like I'm letting her off easy." Barbara smiled and adjusted her red-framed glasses. "David, you're not letting her off anything. You're making her face what she's done publicly, repay what she stole, and restructure her life under your terms. That's not mercy, that's justice. The difference is you're not destroying her in the process. She tried to destroy me. She did. And she failed. Because you're better than she is." Barbara took a sip of her coffee. "I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. I've seen people handle power in different ways. Karen used it to hurt people. You have the chance to use it to heal this community. Don't waste that opportunity by becoming what she was." I thought about that conversation all Sunday night. By Monday morning, I'd convinced myself that Barbara was right. I was taking the high road. I was being the bigger person. Then Monday afternoon, everything changed. I was at my home office when I received an email from my lawyer with the subject line, "Urgent Karen Mitchell, criminal activity." My stomach dropped as I opened it. "David," the email began, "I've been contacted by the prosecutor's office handling the HOA embezzlement case. Their forensic audit uncovered something much bigger than we initially thought. Karen wasn't just embezzling from the HOA. She's been running a mortgage fraud scheme involving at least 4 other properties in the area. The fraud totals over $300,000. They're filing criminal charges tomorrow morning. I wanted you to hear this from me first, before it becomes public. Call me." I sat staring at my screen, my mind reeling. $300,000 for other properties. This wasn't just a desperate woman stealing to pay her bills. This was organized, systematic fraud. I called my lawyer immediately. "Tell me everything." The forensic accountant found evidence that Karen has been creating fake property transactions using her position as HOA treasurer to access personal information. She'd identify homeowners who were behind on payments, create fraudulent loan modifications, and pocket the fees. She even forged signatures on refinancing documents. The FBI's involved now because she crossed state lines with some of the transactions. The FBI. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is federal wire fraud. David, Karen's looking at 20 years minimum, if convicted. The prosecutor wanted you to know because you're technically a victim, Tushy, to sue you as part of covering her tracks. They might need you to testify. After the call ended, I sat in my office trying to process this information. The woman I'd offered a second chance to wasn't just a petty imp. She was a serious criminal who'd victimized multiple families. Had I been a complete fool to offer her any mercy at all? I called Barbara immediately and explained everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Oh my God," Barbara finally said. "I knew she'd stolen from the HOA. But this, David, you need to be careful. If she's desperate enough to commit fraud on this scale, there's no telling what she might do when she realizes the walls are closing in. Should I withdraw my offer? I mean, it's meaningless now, anyway. She's going to prison." "That's up to you. But the HOA meeting is tomorrow night, and people deserve to know the truth. Whether she shows up or not, we should proceed." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the families Karen had hurt, all the lives she'd damaged with her greed, and I kept thinking about how close I'd come to being manipulated by her desperation at my doorstep. Tuesday morning, I woke up to chaos in the neighborhood. News vans were parked on our street. Reporters were everywhere. The story had broken: local HOA treasurer arrested for multi-state mortgage fraud scheme. I watched from my window as federal agents entered Karen's house at 7:15 a.m. They were inside for 3 hours, carrying out boxers of documents, computers, and files. Karen was let out in handcuffs at 10:23 a.m., her head down, her expensive sunglasses unable to hide her tears. The neighborhood had gathered on lawns and driveways. watching the spectacle. Some people looked shocked. Others looked vindicated. I saw Mrs. Henderson crying on her husband's shoulder. The Petersons, an elderly couple from 3 houses down, were talking urgently with a reporter. Barbara appeared at my door around 11 a.m. "Have you seen the news? Hard to miss it. The FBI is saying this could be one of the largest HOA-related fraud cases in state history. Karen victimized 17 families across 3 counties. Some people lost their entire life savings." Barbara looked tired, older than I'd ever seen her. "I worked with her for 6 years. David. How did I not see this? Because she was careful. Because she was smart about hiding it. You can't blame yourself. Can't I? I was the president. The oversight was my responsibility." She sat down heavily on my couch. "The whole board is probably going to have to resign. There will be lawsuits, insurance claims. This neighborhood is going to be dealing with the fallout for years." Over the next several hours, the full scope of Karen's crimes emerged through news reports and official statements. She'd been running her scheme for 7 years, starting small with HOA embezzlement and gradually expanding to mortgage fraud. She'd created shell companies, forged documents, and manipulated vulnerable homeowners who were struggling financially. One of her victims was featured on the evening news, a single mother named Jennifer who'd fallen behind on her mortgage after her husband died. Karen had approached her with an offer to modify her loan, charged her $8,000 in fees, and provided fraudulent documents that Jennifer believed were legitimate. When the real lender initiated foreclosure proceedings, Jennifer discovered she'd been scammed. She lost her house and her life savings. "She seemed so professional, so official," Jennifer said on camera, crying. "She was the HOA treasurer. I trusted her. How was I supposed to know she was stealing from me?" Watching that interview broke something inside me. I'd been so focused on my own battle with Karen, my own petty fines and harassment, that I hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of her crimes. She hadn't just been a bully. She'd been a predator, targeting the most vulnerable people she could find. The HOA meeting that evening was packed. Over 100 residents showed up, along with reporters and what appeared to be FBI agents taking notes in the back row. Barbara called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. "I know everyone has questions," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'll do my best to answer them. But first, I want to address the elephant in the room. Karen Mitchell has been arrested on federal charges of wire fraud, mortgage fraud, and embezzlement. The investigation is ongoing, but initial findings suggest she defrauded at least 17 families of over $300,000. The room erupted in angry voices. Barbara raised her hand for quiet. "I understand everyone is upset and angry. I am too. As your HOA president, I failed to catch this, and for that I am deeply sorry. I'll be offering my resignation effective immediately, and I encourage the entire board to do the same. We need fresh leadership and a complete restructuring of our financial oversight." "No." The voice came from the back of the room. I turned to see Mrs. Henderson standing up. "Barbara, you didn't steal anything. You didn't commit fraud. You were deceived, like all of us. We don't want your resignation. We want you to help us fix this mess." A chorus of agreement rippled through the crowd. Barbara looked genuinely moved. "I appreciate that. But Mrs. Henderson is right," another voice called out. This time it was Tom Peterson, the retired accountant from Elm Street. "Barbara, you're the only person in this room with the experience and trust to lead us through this crisis. Please don't abandon us now." Barbara looked around the room at all the faces staring at her hopefully. Finally, she nodded. "All right. I'll stay on as president, but I'm instituting immediate changes. First, we're hiring an independent accounting firm to manage our finances. Second, we're creating a resident oversight committee with full transparency into all HOA transactions. Third, we're implementing quarterly audits. No one person will ever have the kind of unchecked authority Karen had. Does anyone object? Silence, then applause. Good. Now, let's talk about moving forward." Barbara looked directly at me. "David June has been one of Karen's primary victims in terms of harassment, though thankfully he avoided her larger fraud schemes. David, would you be willing to share your experience and explain how you uncovered the embezzlement? I stood up, suddenly aware that every eye in the room was on me. I walked to the front and took a deep breath. 3 months ago, I moved to Riverside Meadows thinking I'd found a perfect community. Instead, I found Karen Mitchell waiting to make my life miserable. She'll find me for everything she could think of: wrong trash can colors, hedge heights, parking violations that didn't exist. In 2 months, she extracted over $4,000 from me in ridiculous citations. I saw heads nodding throughout the room. Clearly, I wasn't the only one who'd experienced Karen's harassment. But the fines weren't really about the money for her. They were about power and control. When I finally stood up to her at an HOA meeting, she escalated. She filed a frivolous lawsuit against me for $10,000 just to intimidate me into silence. That's when I decided to fight back. I started documenting everything and researching her background. What I found led me to discover the HOA embezzlement. I brought that evidence to Barbara and my lawyer, but what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the embezzlement was just the tip of the iceberg. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I also discovered that Karen was in serious financial trouble. Her mortgage was 7 months delinquent. The bank was preparing foreclosure proceedings. So I did something that, in retrospect, was probably crazy. I bought her mortgage debt. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. I paid $170,000 to become Karen's mortgage holder. My plan was to use that leverage to force her to confess to the embezzlement, apologize to everyone she'd hurt, and work out a repayment plan. I actually offered her a zero-interest restructure if she'd take accountability for her actions. "Why would you do that?" someone called out. "Because I thought she was just a desperate woman who'd made terrible choices. I thought maybe if I gave her a path to redemption, she'd take it." Primera, Juá, ese wrong. She wasn't desperate. She was criminal. She wasn't making mistakes. She was running a deliberate fraud operation that destroyed families. I looked around the room. I'm telling you this because I want everyone to understand something important. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Karen showed us who she was every single day. She was cruel, manipulative, and power-hungry. We should have stopped her years ago. I should have fought back harder from day one, instead of just paying her fines and hoping she'd leave me alone. But here's what I learned. Standing up to bullies works. Documenting evidence works. Refusing to be intimidated works. If I'd just kept quiet and paid her fines, she'd still be operating her fraud scheme. She'd still be victimizing families. She'd still be terrorizing this neighborhood. I turned to Barbara. "You taught me something important. You showed me what real leadership looks like, standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. You backed me up when Karen tried to crush me. You demanded accountability even when it was easier to look the other way. That's the kind of HOA president we need." Barbara's eyes were wet behind her red glasses. Several people in the audience were openly crying. "So here's my proposal," I continued. "I own Karen's mortgage debt. That debt is secured by a house that will probably be seized by the federal government as part of asset forfeiture. I'm likely going to lose most or all of my investment, but I don't care about that anymore. What I care about is making sure we rebuild this community into something better than what Karen made it. I'm donating any recovery I get from Karen's house sale to a victim compensation fund. Every family she defrauded should get something back, even if it's not everything they lost. And I'm proposing we create a new HOA charter that prevents anyone from ever having the kind of unchecked power Karen had." The room erupted in applause. People were standing, clapping, some cheering. I felt embarrassed and emotional and relieved all at once. Barbara stood up and hugged me. "Thank you," she whispered. "You just gave this community hope." The meeting continued for another 2 hours as we discussed restructuring plans, victim support, and criminal proceedings. By the time it ended at 10:15 p.m., I was exhausted, but also energized. We were actually going to fix this. As people filed out, Tom Peterson approached me with a concerned expression. "David, can I talk to you privately for a moment?" We stepped outside into the parking lot. Tom looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. "I didn't want to say anything in front of everyone, but you need to know something. Karen called me 3 days ago, before she was arrested. She was rambling, not making much sense, but she kept saying something about insurance and making sure everyone goes down with her. I thought she was just being paranoid, but after hearing about the scope of her fraud... What are you saying, Tom? I'm saying Karen Mitchell is vindictive. And calculating if she's going to prison, she might try to take other people down with her. You should be careful, David. You're the person she hates most in this neighborhood. If she's going to lash out at anyone, it'll be you. I thanked Tom for the warning, but honestly, I wasn't too worried. Karen was in federal custody. What could she possibly do to me now? I was about to find out that I'd drastically underestimated her one final time. Has Karen really been defeated? Or does she have one last revenge plan? What insurance was she talking about? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Tom Peterson's warning echoed in my mind as I drove home from the HOA meeting. Kara was in federal custody, facing decades in prison, but something about his concern felt legitimate. Karen had always been calculating, always 3 steps ahead. What if she really did have some kind of insurance plan? I found out the next morning. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to my phone ringing non-stop. Texts, emails, and voicemails flooded in simultaneously. My heart racing, I opened the first message from Barbara. David, call me immediately. Emergency. I called her back, and she answered on the first ring. David, Karen posted something online last night from jail. It's bad. What kind of something? She's claiming you conspired with her on the mortgage fraud scheme. She posted documents, fake ones. I assumed that show transactions between you two. She's saying you bought her mortgage as part of a money laundering operation and that you threatened to expose her if she didn't cooperate. It's all lies, but it's spreading everywhere. Local news is picking it up. My blood ran cold. She's trying to frame me. Her lawyer posted bail 2 hours ago. She's out, David. And she's not done yet. I spent the next hour calling my lawyer, who was already aware of the situation. Don't panic, he said, though his tone suggested he was concerned. These accusations are easily disproven. We have complete documentation of the legitimate mortgage purchase. Karen's credibility is destroyed. But you need to prepare for this to get ugly before it gets better. He was right about the ugly part. By noon, my doorbell was ringing constantly with reporters wanting statements. My phone number had somehow been leaked, and I was receiving threatening calls from people who believed Karen's lies. Social media was exploding with conspiracy theories about how I'd manipulated Karen and stolen her house. The worst part was watching my neighbors' reactions. Some stood by me, completely Barbara. The Hendersons, Tom Peterson, but others looked at me with suspicion now. Had I really helped Karen commit fraud? Was I as bad as she was? I was sitting in my living room around 2 p.m., curtains drawn against the reporters outside, when someone knocked on my back door. I approached cautiously and looked through the peephole. It was Karen. My first instinct was to call the police, but something stopped me. She was alone, and she looked different. Smaller somehow. Defeated. I opened the door, but kept the screen door locked between us. What do you want, Karen? 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes to talk before this all ends. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the screen door and let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where this all had started months ago when she first delivered my citations. I'm going to prison, she said quietly, staring at her hands. 23 years minimum. My lawyer says I'll be 79 when I get out. My life is over. You did this to yourself. I know. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Not manipulation, not calculation. Just exhaustion and regret. I didn't come here to defend what I did. I came to tell you the truth, and to offer you something. The truth. Karen, you've been posting lies about me all night. I know. That was my lawyer's idea. Create reasonable doubt. Muddy the waters, give the prosecutor a reason to offer a plea deal. But it's not going to work. The FBI has everything. Every transaction, every forged document, every victim. I'm done! She reached into her purse, and I tensed, but she just pulled out a folder. This is every piece of evidence I manufactured against you. Every fake transaction record, every altered document. I'm giving it to you so you can prove it's all false. Take it to your lawyer. Clear your name completely. I took the folder. Suspicious. Why would you help me after everything? Because you did something no one else did. When you had me cornered, when you owned my mortgage, and could have destroyed me completely, you offered me a way out. You offered me 0 interest and a payment plan. You offered me dignity. Her voice cracked. I didn't take it because I'm a coward. I thought I could keep running, keep scamming, keep finding angles. But I was wrong. She stood up slowly. I've hurt a lot of people, David. 17 families lost everything because of me. You lost $4,000 in fines, and $178,000 buying my worthless mortgage. I can't fix any of that. The money's gone. I spent it all trying to maintain an image of success while I was drowning in debt. But I can do one thing. I can tell the truth. She walked to my door, then turned back. There's a press conference at 5 p.m. today at the courthouse. The prosecutor is making a statement about my case. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to confess everything publicly. Every crime, every victim, every lie, including the lies I told about you. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you had nothing to do with my fraud. Why? I couldn't help asking. What do you get out of confessing? Maybe a few years off my sentence if I cooperate fully. But honestly, I'm just tired. Tired of lying, tired of scheming, tired of being the person I became. She opened the door. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you were right about something. There is a difference between revenge and justice. I wish I'd learned that lesson before I destroyed my life. She left, and I stood in my kitchen holding the folder, unsure what to believe. Was this another manipulation? Another scheme? Or was Karen Mitchell actually capable of genuine remorse? At 4:45 p.m., I drove to the courthouse. A crowd had gathered: reporters, victims, curious onlookers. Barbara met me at the entrance, along with Tom Peterson and several other neighbors who'd come to support me. You shouldn't be here, Barbara said. Whatever Karen says, it might be hard to hear. I need to hear it. I need to see this through to the end. At exactly 5 p.m., the prosecutor stepped up to a podium covered in microphones. Good evening. I'm here to announce that Karen Louise Mitchell has agreed to plead guilty to 47 counts of wire fraud, mortgage fraud, embezzlement, and related charges, in exchange for her full cooperation and testimony against her co-conspirators. The prosecution is recommending a sentence of 18 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before 15 years served. So, she had been working with others. Miss Mitchell has provided evidence leading to the arrests of 3 additional individuals involved in the mortgage fraud scheme: her brother, a loan officer at Pacific Trust Bank, and a notary public who falsified documents. The total fraud amount has been updated to $432,000, affecting families. The prosecutor continued with technical details, but I was focused on Karen, who stood off to the side with her lawyer. She looked small in her simple gray suit. Nothing like the imperious HOA treasurer who'd terrorized our neighborhood. Finally, the prosecutor said, Miss Mitchell has also requested to make a statement. This is unusual, but given her cooperation, we've agreed to allow it. Karen stepped to the podium. Her hands were shaking as she unfolded a piece of paper. My name is Karen Mitchell, and I am a criminal. Her voice was barely audible at first. For 7 years, I stole from my neighbors, defrauded innocent families, and destroyed lives to fund a lifestyle I couldn't afford. I hurt people who trusted me. I betrayed a community that gave me responsibility, and when someone tried to hold me accountable, I tried to destroy him too. She looked directly at me. In the crowd, David Chun moved to Riverside Meadows 3 months ago. From the moment he arrived, I targeted him with harassment and frivolous fines. When he fought back and uncovered my embezzlement, I tried to sue him for $10,000. When he legally purchased my mortgage debt and offered me a chance to make things right, I refused and instead tried to frame him as my accomplice. Everything I posted online about David Chun was a lie. Every document I created implicating him was fabricated. He had absolutely nothing to do with my crimes. In fact, he's one of the few people who tried to show me mercy when he had every right to destroy me. I responded to that mercy by trying to ruin his reputation and his life. Cameras flashed as reporters captured every word. I could see some of the fraud victims in the crowd crying. "I can't undo what I've done," Karen continued. "Jennifer Torres lost her house because of me. The Stevenson family lost their retirement savings. Michael Park lost his daughter's college fund. 21 families, 21 had their lives destroyed because I was greedy and selfish and cruel." Her voice broke completely now. "I told myself I deserved the money because I worked hard, because I was smart, because other people were stupid for trusting me. But the truth is, I'm just a thief who used her position to prey on vulnerable people. I'm sorry. I know that means nothing. I know sorry doesn't pay back stolen money or restore lost homes or fix broken lives, but it's all I have left to give." She stepped back from the podium and was immediately led away by federal marshals. The press conference dissolved into chaos as reporters shouted questions and victims called out in anger. Barbara grabbed my arm. "Come on, let's get you out of here." We pushed through the crowd to the parking lot. I felt numb, disconnected from everything happening around me. "Are you okay?" Barbara asked. When we reached my car, "I don't know. I wanted justice. I got it. But it doesn't feel the way I thought it would." "That's because you're a good person, David. Bad people celebrate when their enemies fall. Good people just feel sad about the waste of it all." Over the next few weeks, Karen's confession dominated local news. The FBI arrested her co-conspirators. The victim compensation process began, though most families would only recover a fraction of what they'd lost. My name was completely cleared, though some internet conspiracy theorists refused to let go of the idea that I'd somehow been involved. The HOA underwent major restructuring under Barbara's leadership. We hired a professional management company to handle finances. We created oversight committees. We rewrote our covenant to prevent future abuses of power. Slowly, the neighborhood began to heal. As for Karen's mortgage, the federal government did seize her house as part of asset forfeiture. I lost most of my $178,000 investment, though I did eventually recover about $43,000 after the property was sold. True to my word, I donated all of it to the Victim Compensation Fund. Karen was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She served her time quietly, participating in education programs and, according to reports, becoming a model prisoner. Several victims attended her sentencing. Some spoke about the devastating impact of her crimes. Others, surprisingly, spoke about forgiveness and hope for her rehabilitation. I didn't attend. I'd said everything I needed to say. 2 years later, I was sitting on my front porch, a different house, as I'd sold the Riverside Meadows property and moved to a quieter neighborhood without an HOA, or when I received a letter. The return address was a federal correctional institution. It was from Karen. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Dear David, I don't expect you to read this, and I certainly don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I think about what you said often. You told me there's a difference between revenge and justice. You were right. Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is about making things right. Even when it's hard, even when it doesn't satisfy the anger you feel. You chose justice when you could have chosen revenge. You offered me a chance to do better when you had every reason to want me destroyed. I didn't take that chance, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But your example taught me something important. It's never too late to choose to be better than you were. I'm trying to do that now, even if it's from behind bars. I'm teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates. I'm working with a victims advocacy group to help people recognize fraud schemes. It doesn't undo what I did, but maybe it prevents someone else from becoming what I was. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. It's not about power over others. It's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching, even when it costs you something. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy wherever you are. Karen Mitja, inmate number 7853-2194. I folded the letter and sat for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Barbara had been right all along. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about what happens when people choose to be better than their worst impulses. Karen had chosen greed and cruelty, and it destroyed her life. I had chosen justice and dignity, and it had set me free. In the end, that was the only revenge I needed, the freedom to move forward while she remained trapped by consequences of her own making. Not because I'd crushed her, but because she'd crushed herself. And somehow, that felt like the right ending after all. 3 years after Karen's sentencing, Riverside Meadows had transformed completely. Under Barbara's continued leadership, it became one of the most well-managed HOA communities in the state. The victims of Karen's fraud had recovered about 60% of their losses through various legal settlements and the compensation fund. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I visited the old neighborhood occasionally. Barbara always welcomed me with coffee and updates. The community had memorialized the ordeal by creating an annual transparency day where all HOA finances were publicly reviewed and discussed. It was their way of ensuring that what happened with Karen could never happen again. As for me, I learned something valuable from the whole experience. Power isn't about control. It's about responsibility. And the truest form of winning isn't destroying your enemy, it's refusing to become one yourself. Karen taught me what not to be. Barbara taught me what to aspire to. And somewhere in between those two extremes, I found out who I actually was. That's worth more than any revenge could ever be. And that's the end of this incredible true story. What would you have done in David's position? Would you have shown Karen mercy or crushed her completely? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We have more amazing HOA revenge stories coming your way. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply being better than the person who wronged you.